Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. We appreciate you tuning in, being a part of our show each and every week. We started this journey with you in the midst of COVID, and we're still here. We're over, I think, 100 episodes. We're going to have to do a official celebration of that. Hey, Kevin, thank you for tuning in, being one of our regular listeners here on the show. We appreciate you, and thank you so much. Of course, I'm joined by my legal experts. Yes, one is not here. From time to time, these busy legal experts have other things that compete with their schedules when they're on location. And Mr. Russell is handling a very important business called family and being a good father and husband. So we say hello to Mr. Russell, who's probably tuning in on the road, but we appreciate you being here to follow us today and a great conversation because we have a attorney, Edward Pichado Esquire, with us. So, Ed, you want to go ahead and greet everybody?
Yes, hello. When I started this, good afternoon to the audience. Thank you for joining us today. As Dr. Grant mentioned earlier, our esteemed colleague Royce Russell will not be able to join us today, but he's definitely here in spirit. I think we have a very good show here today that you're going to find quite entertaining, fulfilling, as well as educational. So hold on to your seats, folks. I think you're going to like some of what comes up here today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you, Mr. Pichado. And, we always acknowledge when we find out in the news that we have those who have transitioned to becoming one of our ancestors. And this is one that anyone who grew up in the 80s/90s, about the legend himself, Biz Markie. We were just talking about it, and then some of his songs are like ringing in my head. He was a pioneering rapper, producer, beatboxer. He was loved by so many in the industry. And, he died at a really, really young age. And he was with his wife, who was by his side. And, his representative said, "We are grateful for the many calls and prayers of support that they've received." He created a legacy of artistry that will forever be celebrated by his industry peers and his beloved fans. And he was able to touch so many through his music. So truly something, right, Ed, to see that Biz is no longer with us.
Oh yeah. I found this news it just hit me so hard. I loved Biz Markie. I graduated from high school, entered college in the '80s, and I used to listen to his music on my Walkman. For those who don't remember the Walkmans, you had the little cassette and you put it in a little Walkman with your headphones, and you just bopped your head to Biz Markie, him and the Juice Crew. He had been sick for several months, and there had been rumors that he was on his deathbed. In fact, there had been some premature news that had come out. About a month ago or some weeks back that was debunked by refuted by the family, but sure enough, it ended up happening. They're saying he was fighting a long battle with type 2 diabetes. I mean, Biz was unique. He was a genius. One of the things that I tell folks is that the first time I ever heard of Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm was not in the history book, was not watching a documentary. It was from a Biz Markie song where he says, "Reagan is the president, but I voted for Shirley Chisholm." And I was like, "Who's Shirley Chisholm?" And so, I do my research. There wasn't even no internet at that time. I had to go, I think, to an encyclopedia or the library, and I was like, "Oh snap! This is the first black woman to run for president for a major party." And if you guys recall, about a year ago, we talked about the actual first black woman who ran for president. So, you guys, I'm not going to say her name. You need to look for that episode, or I'll try to maybe tell you what the exact episode it was on our next episode. But in any event, I send my prayers out and my condolences to Bismarck's family. He was definitely someone special, and he definitely will be missed. No question, no doubt.
Absolutely. Kevin said on the hip hop front, any thoughts on the Jay Z look, we're not gonna get into the Jay-Z and the Dame Dash matter on this show because I don't even know what's going on with that. But we're recognizing Biz Markie as one of our ancestors that's transitioned. So Kevin, you're gonna have to send us information on that. But we wanted to definitely just pause and just recognize that we lost another great, incredible contributor to our experience culturally. This is where the legal meets the cultural. So we appreciate that. And Kevin, if that's a legal issue that Jay-Z and Dame Dash are dealing with, maybe our legal experts will touch on that, but we're going to have to do a little bit more research because I'm not familiar.
Yeah, and I would definitely like Royce to participate in that discussion because he has done some trademark litigation. From what I understand, is definitely it may be an intellectual property issue. I believe they owned a company together, and over the years there's been some issues. There was a separation some years back. So what we'll do certainly, Kevin, is I'll discuss it with Royce, and we'll bear down on that subject more heavily for you, no question.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that. And, bringing the news that you want clarity on. That's why we're here at Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. So sleep in peace, Biz. A 1-2, a 1-2. Okay, I'm not.
Rest in power. A 1-2, a
1-2. Mr. Russell was here. He, going to his glory days.
He be doing the show for human beings.
Yeah, but we've been spared. We've been spared that. But I'm sure I'm going to pay for that comment later. But anyway, we're going to move on with the other legal news, not as interesting culturally, but definitely interesting culturally. You'll know what I mean when I talk about revisiting a story on the insurrection, right? We were waiting to see what happens. How is the government going to deal with this attempted coup? And there has been some handing down, Mr. Pichardo, of the first felony sentence tied to the Capitol riot. And the fact that they call it Capitol riot instead of insurrection still annoys me because that's what it was. But anyway,
Paul, Paul Hodgkins, how about an attack? Well, this gentleman, basically, he's the first one to actually have been sentenced for a felony related to this incident. Apparently, they're treating those who entered the actual Senate chamber much more harshly than they are those who simply entered the Capitol. Don't understand why. I feel like if you entered the Capitol, the minute that you breached the Capitol, you should be getting hit as hard as that bat can hit you. I mean, come on, really? But
exactly.
Hey, listen, it is what it is. Apparently, Mr. Hodgkins pled to obstruction of proceedings before departments, agencies, and committees, which essentially he was charged with obstructing those proceedings related to the verification of the count. That would be 18 USC section 1505, which carries a sentence of imprisonment of not more than 5 years, or if the offense involves international domestic terrorism, imprisonment for not more than 8 years, or both. The judge basically followed the sentencing guidelines, and it seems that Mr. Hodgkins didn't have a previous record, so what he got was an 8-month sentence. His attorney was asking for a non-incarceration sentence. The prosecutor was asking, I believe, for 16 months, somewhere in that range, and the judge did 8 months. This is, the way this process is shaking out is definitely interesting. The big importance here is that this being the first, many of the other judges will be compelled to some extent to not sentence someone, or rather not to depart too much from this sentence, because they don't want to create these extreme disparities in the sentences that people are receiving throughout the different circuits and district courts. You know, this is a telltale sign that for those who are charging, pleading to, you know, this felony, you know, this is what they are going to receive insofar as a sentence is concerned. You know, that's where, you know, we're going to continue to keep you updated on, you know, these proceedings and how these sentences progress, what these folks plead to, and, you know, what they're going to get in terms of punishment. As you recall, last week we talked about a gentleman who had a previous felony record and received a 6-month sentence, which he was released at the sentencing because he had been in jail since the time of the attack, approximately 6 months ago. He had been apprehended shortly thereafter. As you, Dr. Grant, I call it either insurrection or an attack on the Capitol. I don't use funny language like a riot, you know, because this went beyond a
Way
riot,
beyond.
way
Way
beyond,
beyond.
you know, because as his attorney was trying to equate his behavior, of course, like a lot of the other defenses, oh, this is the same as a, you know, protest on the left side of things. No, it wasn't. No, it
No,
wasn't.
they tried. They tried, but I love what I'm reading here in this article, that as he imposed the sentence, Moss said that Hodgkins sent a profound and dangerous message by raising the Trump flag by the Senate dais at the hour members of Congress were supposed to be confirming President Joe Biden's victory. And the symbolism of that act is unmistakable, the judge said. In that act, he captured the threat to democracy that we all witnessed that day. People have to know that assaulting the United States Capitol and impeding the democratic process, even if you don't come bearing arms, will have consequences. Coming a little bit more than 6 months after a crowd loyal to former Donald Trump battled with police and overran the Capitol. We know that part, but I want to scroll down to the sentencing that while this happened in Monday in federal courtroom, just a few blocks from the Capitol, the prosecution bluntly labeled the attack on Congress as terrorism. And a defense attorney vehemently argued against it, as you said. And, you know, it's just interesting to hear what people are actually quoted as saying. January 6th was an act of domestic terrorism. Assistant U.S. Attorney Mona Sedetsky said he was part and parcel an act of domestic terrorism that was going on around him. And then the response from his attorney, he said he grew emotional as he insisted that this was a mistake to brand as terrorism as a protest by Americans that got out of hand. What?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, listen, defense attorneys are defense attorneys. They're going to do their job. The part of the emotion, you know, hey, but you know, I vehemently disagree with this gentleman when he says that this man, Paul Hoskins, is not my enemy. Maybe he's not your enemy. He's certainly mine, as well as other Americans. I mean, what they did on that day was completely just you know, out of the range of anyone who purports to be patriotic to this republic, to this country. So, but enough about
Yeah, because
him. Yeah, because
that,
we
and you
can
know
go
what?
on.
When we move on to the next topic, what I also want to underscore is important. Once again, we talk about the narrative. Who's created the narrative? Who's driving the narrative? Because that defense attorney, emotional, probably because he really does believe that there was some difference in what we witnessed. And we know that this was another protest with anybody with melanin in their skin. This would have been a whole different situation. They wouldn't have been allowed to get that far. Like it would. Okay, my pressure is going up again, Mr. Pichardo. We're just going to watch and see what happens with the rest of these, because there's been over 500 arrests, apparently. I know they haven't gotten to every case, but this was the first one, and why we wanted to make sure that this sentencing was shared so you can watch what's happening and really see how we move as a country towards some form of justice. So,
Well, what's going to be interesting, of course, what I've been looking at, as well as, you know, these various sentences and the people who have been thus far charged and arrested, is also a particular group of those folks who were much more organized. And, you know, groups like the Proud Boys and some of these other militias, they seem to be putting pressure on certain leaders to, flip on the others. So, and these folks actually came armed to the Capitol. So I also want to see how those folks are going to be treated insofar as the way that they organized to do what they did, because what we've been seeing so far is kind of your average Joe or Jane saying, I was there, I did it, but not really linking them to something much more organized and nefarious. So, I want to see what happens with those folks. Certainly, that I think is going to be interesting because to a certain degree, those folks are a continuing threat. This idea of Americans organizing in a way to deprive the rest of us of our franchise and our democratic rights, and so definitely interesting to watch. So we'll be monitoring that closely for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have more to monitor as usual here on Speaking Legally. We've been talking about what has happened and is still underway with the election of new leadership in New York City. This is a place where the world watches to see what happens, what's going on. And right now, after the primary, there is quite a bit that's still not settled. So this conversation is around some very heated challenges in District 15, 19, 23, 22, 24, 32, and 50. So it's not like it's just one area where there's going to be some particular challenges with who's running, but I think there's a heated situation happening in Harlem World. Do you
Oh
know about
yeah,
this?
absolutely. I happen to reside in the ninth council district, New York City, and in that race there were several candidates, but the top candidate on election night was a venerable Bill Perkins, former senator. I believe at one point he may have been an assemblyman as well, longtime member of the city council. He was in the lead, and then he was eventually overtaken through different rounds of ranked choice voting counts by Kristen Richardson Jordan. And right now they have approximately 114 votes, I believe, separating them. And anytime you have a 0.5% difference or less, a manual recount is automatically triggered to make sure that the actual votes match what the machine count has yielded or delivered. So that race, and there's another very, very tight race, I believe, in Staten Island as well, that has fallen below that 0.5% threshold. I know that Jordan's election lawyer was kind of arguing that the law concerning these automatic manual recounts doesn't match a ranked choice voting situation. So I'm not sure if that's going to result in some level of litigation or what, but I believe I read an article with the candidate herself saying that let them count all they want, I won. So we're gonna see what happens, but it's gonna be, that's an interesting one right there for sure. And I also read that there is that there was a very small amount of voting difference between Adams and 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 the other candidate in terms of what he won by. So it's just interesting, some of these results. I mean, whether it was a result of ranked choice voting or not, I know there was a hearing, I guess this week or last, where several individuals testified, talking about how troublesome they found the ranked choice voting to be. The question is whether it will be repealed. Who knows? But we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, that's a tight race right in my backyard.
Absolutely. And, good old ranked choice voting. This says there's been some ups, there's been some downs. I'm curious to see, will it continue? Because, once we pass November, who's in is in. So even if something happens, what are they going to repeal and go all the way back to what? Come on now. We know in New York City.
Well, that's the thing. There were during that hearing, there were a number of victorious candidates who were right outside that hearing saying, hey, because it was like invitation only. I don't know why it was invitation only, but I suspect the reason being that the most vociferous opponents of ranked choice are a lot of the folks that are kind of part of the institutions, the clubs and the so forth, and are part of the normal network, and the candidates that were outside saying, listen, we got elected, we have no problem with it, or many of them being outsiders, people like Tiffany Caban, who came close to becoming the Queen's
attorney.
DA, but now has a council seat, and some others who felt like, but for this, they wouldn't have won, because normally, if the party infrastructure machine backs you, it's very difficult to beat that individual without an overwhelming response from the community. So but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Well, it's two that are really on the hot button as we follow up. It's District 9 and District 50. We were just mentioning all of these other areas where it was quite interesting, but they voted to certify everyone else. So everyone else is certified moving into November. We'll have to see what happens in District 9 and, like you said, in District 50 in Staten Island, because it was less than the 0.5%. So once again, I just want to drive home another point that I make over and over again on the show. Be a part of the process. Get engaged. Yeah. Some of these were only a couple of hundred of votes. That's a couple of blocks. If everybody went out to vote, they could have turned the election. And maybe someone that you wanted to see elected didn't get elected because you didn't go out there on the horn and say, hey, have you voted? Did you remind your friends and family, co-workers to go and cast their vote? So we have another opportunity. All is not lost. November is coming. You still need to go and vote. So don't think because the primary is over, like, oh, okay, all the literature has stopped coming to my house, like it's a wrap. No, you still need to go out and vote to ensure that the person that won the primary is going to take office. We don't want to take anything for granted that once the primary is over, it's over. Stranger things have happened. Go vote.
Yeah, no, amen to that. People need to go out and vote and exercise the franchise. There are several people in other countries who don't have the privilege. They don't get to vote right now. The situation in Haiti, many people are arguing that this newly installed prime minister was chosen for them, by this group called the Core Group. This group of ambassadors and diplomats decided that this was the right guy for the seat, and many observers are like, wait a minute, when they were asking the U.S. representative from the State Department who was putting forth the news, those that were there, members of the press, were asking, well, I thought you guys were supporting the other guy. How are you now shifting to this? And we've been in consultation with, these people, and like what people, and so listen, get out there and vote, exercise your franchise. This is your opportunity to pick your leaders and for you to decide who it is that you want deciding the issues in your community on your behalf. It's a representative government, and, you get to elect your representative. So here you go. You may argue that, this and that is rigged in the process, but if you don't participate, you can't make any of those arguments.
Exactly. That's the whole point. If you're not involved, then don't complain. Don't complain when you don't have resources for the schools for our children. Don't complain when our seniors don't get the proper care and support that they need. Don't complain when the buses don't run timely in your neighborhoods. Don't complain when the roads and the infrastructure are breaking down around you. It's who you put in office that is able to advocate for the things that matter. So that's just our public service announcement. Go vote. So we'll be watching what happens in District 9 and District 50. It'll be interesting to see how this all pans out, as well as the fights against this ranked choice voting. What really, when the dust settles, is it going to be remaining with us from now until whenever, or are city council members going to have a change of mind? We'll see.
I mean, listen, I every election day, I do the rounds. I call up my friends, my buddies. Hey, listen, did you vote? Some of them say, yeah, I did. Some of them saying I will, and many say, oh snap, I didn't even realize it was election day, and now, and this is one of the things that I hope stays in place, that isn't just some sort of remnant of the pandemic, is the early voting. Even though people are saying that it hasn't been fully utilized, that a lot of people are still waiting, till election day, I feel that it's worth it staying in place, whatever resources that have to be dedicated to it. I mean, there should be no reason why voting should be confined to one day. I mean, there are several reasons why you might not be able to vote on that day, and you should have the opportunity to vote early. You should,
if you desire. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So to be continued as we go through, and those in other parts of the country that tune into the show, I'm sure that you have your versions of elections and elected officials and such. Just stay on top of it. Hey, Melanda, great to see you. Stay on top of it so that you're aware of who we're putting in office. So, with that being said, back to a little bit more politics. We know we have quite a few of you who listen within the New York, New Jersey tri-state area. And we had a whole show talking about impacts of COVID, some of which we have yet to really see, yet to really understand how that's going to impact your employment and decisions and options that you have. And, every state looks at what New York State does. And Mayor Bill de Blasio has made an interesting mandate that has recently been released. So this is very concerning for a lot of city workers. It's time to act. Mayor unveils city health COVID vax mandate. That's the part, as the kids would say, that part. How are people taking this?
Yeah, no. Well, despite the label, I mean, it is a mandate. Basically, what the mayor is saying is that you either need to be vaccinated or subject yourself to a rigorous, repeated set regimen of testing. Okay, so he's really putting pressure on the employees of the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation to get vaccinated, which when I first heard about this sometime back, I actually found it very surprising that these healthcare workers, I believe it's like a third of them, have not been vaccinated or have not gotten vaccinated, because the vax is available, especially in these facilities throughout the city. And for that large amount of members of that workforce to decide that they're not going to do it is kind of surprising, especially given the fact that they're working around patients and the like. And I gotta say that what people need to understand, and what we discussed some time back, was that at the time that we were engaging in the discussion, we were talking about, I believe, the EEO guidelines and whether or not employees were going to be able to prevent their employers from mandating vaccination. And a lot of what we discussed at that time was that the employer couldn't necessarily mandate vaccination, and certainly not in a discriminatory manner, could subject you to testing. Some of this is going to be very, very, in terms of the restrictions, be very dependent on what type of job you have, whether you're exposed to the public. That employer also has a legal obligation to keep that workplace safe. So with that being said, it was, the writing is on the wall that pretty much in the near future, these vaccinations are eventually going to take on a mandate. And really the only thing that's going to be able to prevent folks from not being vaccinated is for them to show that there is a health related reason for them not being able to be vaccinated. I suffer from some sort of autoimmune disease. I have medical documentation that I have a history of adverse reactions to these vaccines, so I cannot get vaccinated. But then the problem is going to be whether or not that employer has an obligation or has the ability to provide a reasonable accommodation, okay? Because if your job mandates that you do X, Y, and Z, and that employer does not have another position to reasonably accommodate you into, and they need you to be vaccinated, then your job may be in some jeopardy here. And so, right now you have this Delta variant going around. You have an uptick in people, coming up positive for the virus. The mayor is saying, no, I'm not going to go ahead and reimpose masks and all that. The vaccine is available. You should go get it. If you don't get it, then you're going to really have to repeatedly show the fellow members of that or your coworkers that you are negative. And so, I look at this kind of as a, somewhat of a method or means by which to exert a legal amount of pressure. I do know that many people on that side of the legal spectrum argue that these vaccines have not been officially authorized by the federal the Food and Drug Administration, that they're being allowed based on some emergency use authorization, that it's not like a full out and out authorization or approval, if you will. And so, folks are holding on to that and that certain level of a certain this lack of certainty. But others are saying, hey, listen, the process that these vaccines had to undergo in order to even be able to get that emergency authorization was the same as that these drugs would undergo if they were to be approved or out and out approved. And from what is being stated out there, that approval is probably going to be coming soon. So once that FDA full out and out FDA approval comes, I'm not sure if folks who don't have a legitimate health reason are going to be able to avoid this. And just to provide you with some background context, there was a decision back in 1905 by the U.S. Supreme Court, Jacobson versus Massachusetts. Now, let me just kind of give you some background. Massachusetts, along with several of the states, I think about maybe 10 of them, had these compulsory vaccination laws. Not like with this where, please get tested. We're going to give you a certificate for Shake Shack. None of that. Back then, there was apparently a smallpox outbreak. It was extremely contagious. People were dying, and the authorities were like, we got to put a stop to this. There's a vaccine. If you're an adult, you're mandated to take it. And if you don't take it, we are going to fine you. And so Jacobson was an individual who apparently had gotten vaccinated in his home country of Sweden some years back, and had apparently some sort of adverse reaction. And so here he finds himself in Massachusetts during a time when adults are subject to compulsory vaccination. And he decides that, hey, you know what? I'm not getting vaccinated. And if you charge me with a crime for not being vaccinated, I'm going to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. And that's what he did. And the Supreme Court said, sorry, buddy, individual liberty is not absolute and is subject to the police power of the state. It said that the law in place did not violate the 14th Amendment. And so, and even and just to let you know that even that law had an exemption for those found to be an unfit subject of vaccination. I think it mainly applied to children, but the court in its decision did mention back then that Jacobson had not provided proof that he was an unfit subject of vaccination. So it pushed that defense off the table and said, and this decision has been used to support, compulsory vaccination in other contexts when it comes to allow schools saying, listen, you can't attend unless you show proof of vaccination. Why? Because it's looked upon as a danger to others if you're not vaccinated, and it's something that the state can address and act upon and use its power to deal with as a public health and safety a threat. So I say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That before you wrap that up, I want to just go back because you went through a couple of things, and I'm like, well, hold on, Ed. We know we got to make sure that everybody is understanding the implications of what you're breaking down, because the mayor is also mentioning the variant, and the variant apparently is more deadly than the original strain of what took so many lives. So that's part of the driving force and the context for this mandate being shared out. But we also, like you said, there's past legal precedent with this particular case. This is the city of New York. Private employees are still choosing to do what they want to do for their employees. The mask mandate, some businesses are still requiring you to wear masks, where others are taking advantage of the fact that the city is opened and you don't have to. So you really got to do your research for those who are working at certain institutions. What's their practice, and are they going to follow suit with what the city does? Because all of this affects how you move, how your household is protected, and what this looks like. The fall is going to be here before we know it. And I would hate to see that after New York got through one of the worst moments in history, that we don't learn the lessons from what we saw happen before.
Yeah, well, I feel like I definitely feel like it's coming. There's still fight left though in these anti-vaxxers. They're definitely fighting. I read about a particular law firm that's defending a number of litigants who say, listen, you can't take away my right, my liberty, my job, or otherwise punish me for not agreeing to be vaccinated. And right now, companies are reluctant to take these folks on because they're just not sure. It's an uncertain landscape right now. But as things progress, like I said, I would imagine that if the FDA finally approves these vaccines or a set of these vaccines, and you don't get vaccinated and you can't show a real health reasons for what's sad is that what's sad is that the EOC is behind the curve in terms of guidance regarding these workplaces. Well, I believe that they are also trying to sort out these issues too, in terms of the constitutionality of a out and out mandate, the particular context. There are some workplaces that aren't mandating it, that The owner of the company may be one who says, listen, I'm not vaccinated and I'm not going to make any of my workers get vaccinated. At the same time, I would say to that employer, what happens if you have an employee who gets infected and later on, files a wrongful death suit and say that you did nothing to protect me? What's going to happen then? This is a two-sided coin here. And that's what I, tell folks. Hey, listen, you may think that you have the right and you can't make me, I don't want to, or, but, what about the others? I mean, some of my friends who I've convinced to finally get vaccinated was more so with the thought that, how are you going to feel if you infect someone, maybe somebody elderly that you interact with, because, you didn't want to get vaccinated, you otherwise got exposed, or you may never know, right? You may never know, it's unfortunate. But this vax mandate, it just came out. I believe earlier on today was the announcement. I'm not sure what
Yeah,
the union for these workers is going to have to say about this, whether they're going to challenge it in court, whether it's going to be a person by person thing where they're going to then be disciplinary hearings for that first employee who decides, you know what, not only am I not getting vaxxed, but you know what, I'm not going to keep going through all this testing either.
And that's going to be the challenge. I'm telling you, we're just starting to see all of this play out. It's still so new that we don't know how everything is going to fall. And then are we forgetting there's a whole new administration coming in a couple of months, right? So all of what's here is just a part. In an emergency, the Constitution can be set aside. And John said, if you know history, we are set to repeat it. This is going to be, it's concerning. They're saying that the Delta variant of COVID-19 could actually cause a pandemic amongst those who are not vaccinated. It's just so much to consider. That's what they're quoting in this particular article, and just highlighting what Mayor de Blasio has done, because he wants to get ahead of it and not see our city, our country shut down again. I mean, everybody's focused on economic recovery. They want to see people riding the subways and taking the buses and getting on planes and traveling. But just be careful. We continue to say it on this show, and I hope that you are sharing the same message with those that you love and care about. Use wisdom, use your gray matter. The mask alone apparently is not good enough to protect against this variant, according to what they say. And we know that the vaccine doesn't mean that you won't catch COVID, right? It's just supposed to mitigate the chances of you dying from this.
Which I think is important, right?
Yeah, I mean, unless you want to go out of here early, then,
yeah. I mean, I think it's important. Wisdom. Yeah, I think, listen, I think it's important that people consider at least the thought of, do I want some protection against death versus exposing myself to it openly? And, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I just find it a bit amazing, some of the logic that's put forth and arguments that are put forth, against vaccination. And listen, once again, I'm not talking about folks who have like a clear medical, like, listen, I suffer from this and my doctor already advised me not to, so that's the reason why I haven't, and not that you have to even tell me either, because your medical situation is definitely confidential. However, some of the folks that I have conversations with that are like, no, the stuff that I hear is just not, it's not making sense to me. Maybe it's making sense to others, but certainly not myself. And as I pointed out, this is historical. And as Mr. Giambalvo pointed out earlier in terms of the Constitution, well, I would say, that might be an interesting read for you. It's not a terribly long decision, by the way, but it's an interesting read saying that, listen, the Constitution is not gonna prevent the state from, mandating a vaccine or vaccination, especially when there's a clear out and out threat, and the vaccine is the response to that threat. It's gonna, the Constitution is not gonna protect you if you're someone who's trying to prevent the loss of your employment or feeling some, deleterious effects from not being vaccinated. In the case of Jacobson, it wasn't just the loss of the job, it was a fine. At that time, I believe it was $5, which in 1905 must have been a very serious amount of money. The dollar used to be much stronger than it is now. But yeah, there's history for this. It's not the first time that we've dealt with a situation like this where, folks have had to be told, no, listen, you got to go over there and get vaccinated. You got to do it.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And there's still people who fight the vaccinations even with children, right? Because not everybody subscribes to their children having vaccinations. So like you said, this is not a new conversation. It's just taking on a whole nother level of what's actually going to happen in regards to COVID, because this is new. COVID-19 didn't exist prior to us witnessing what we have. So we definitely have to just pay attention. The pandemic will, Vaughn, it is a global game changer, and we're literally living and witnessing history as each day unfolds. So,
and just to mention, the reason why I say uncertainty with a lot of this is because, the legal observers are actually waiting for that case, that case or cases where the court looks at the facts and applies the law to the facts, because it may be a scenario where they say, you know what, you can mandate, but only under these circumstances. Or if you're going to do a mandate, your policy that you set up for that has to say this, or that. And because it said this other thing, then it's not, legal. And, you just don't want to make that mistake and be the test case. You want to see what happens. And then, from there, that's your guide at that point. That's the main reason you got that level of uncertainty, because, you just, this is it's a new world. You also got various vaccines, right? You got different ones. And if you talk about, once you leave U.S. shores, you see so many others. In the Dominican Republic, they had, the Sinovac, the Chinese vaccine. I believe out there in Europe, you got the AstraZeneca, out of England, I believe. Here you got the Pfizer, Moderna, and the Johnson, and so it's it's an interesting landscape. What happens with the person who says they got vaccinated overseas and comes here, and somebody says, oh, well, we don't recognize that vax. Well, I can't get vaccinated. I'm not going to get vaccinated again. What if that harms me? We haven't seen that case yet. That's going to be probably a pretty interesting one, right? I got the Sinovac. We don't recognize the Sinovac. What are you talking about? And they're talking about booster shots. Yeah. This is going to be interesting. This is going to be
new world.
Continue. Oh yeah, absolutely.
New world order.
Definitely.
Well, everyone, thank you for, your participation in the conversation, John and Vaughn and Rolanda. And of course, seeing you, Kevin, we appreciate you. And, it's about how we bring these conversations forward. So from a legal aspect or perspective, you have the chance to hear from our legal experts, to be equipped with the right information, to ask the right questions, and stay engaged in the systems that govern where we live. Like it or hate it, it's what governs us. So we need to be involved in advocating for the changes and the recommendations of the different things that aren't working, and upholding and spearheading what is working. So as we wind down the show today, you had one more thing you wanted to share, Mr. Pichardo?
Oh man, I just wanna recognize my peeps from Milwaukee. Congratulations on the Milwaukee Bucks. They won the NBA championship, world championship last night in a beautiful fashion. Giannis Antetokounmpo scored 50 points. It was just amazing. to watch. Sorry, Chris Paul. I know you've had quite the career. I guess this wasn't the year. But yeah, it was just amazing.
So
I used to live out there, by the way, and I went to law school at Marquette University Law School. So I have a
yeah, so
special relationship with that city.
awesome. And thank you, Kevin. Yeah, let's shout him out. Mr. Russell would have his own words to
Yeah.
say if he was here, but he's not. So we're not going to have to hear about this. But congratulations to the Milwaukee Bucks. Unfortunately, there was some gunfire that got
Oh,
caught up in the news story of people
uh,
that got injured after the celebration. So, you
nah, it was
know,
it, it was stunning to see all of those people watching the game outside of the stadium. But I have to say, I was living out there for quite a number of years, and I would imagine that's probably one of the most exciting things that city has experienced in
yeah,
quite a
50
long
years.
time. Oh
50
yeah,
years.
yeah. But I'm just saying, period. They're not used to this sort of stuff happening. The Milwaukee Brewers. I'm not sure when is the last time they've actually won a World Series. And those, yeah, I think those are the two sports teams that they have. I don't believe that they have a hockey club. They have the baseball, they have the NBA, and of course, you got the Green Bay Packers, which are in Green Bay up north. That's been their anchor in terms of celebrating sports championships for sure. But it's been a while, and like I said, it's not Milwaukee, it's up in Green Bay. So this is especially significant for the city of Milwaukee, which, by the way, has quite a large, African American Latino population.
And who knew? I
Yeah.
didn't. No, but we do want to congratulate them, and they're going to have a big parade and such. So we just pray for safety once again, family. We just have to use wisdom. Nothing is guaranteed. We believe, at least I do, hope springs eternal. And I think Ed does too.
Oh
We'll leave
yeah.
the other commentary, for another day. But we're going to continue to bring you the information, discuss the issues. Thank you, Kevin, for your words. That is our goal. And we thank you for being with us. We wouldn't have a show if we didn't have an audience. So if you're catching it live, we say thank you. Catch the replay, #replay. And we look forward to seeing you again next week, same time, same place. Bye bye, everyone.
Peace.